Greetings, greetings, greetings. This is Joanne Richards Goff from the KW Magazine, welcoming you to another crucial conversation. In case you are just hearing for the first time about the KW Magazine, here's what we do. We have conversations about worship and cultural identity. We have conversations primarily among people of African descent, both on the African continent and in her diasporas. We want to get to know ourselves better. We want to get to know each other better. And ultimately, we want to build deeper, more authentic relationships with our Creator, Yahweh. So, if you want to be a part of this crucial conversation and you have friends that you want to be a part of this conversation, then I am asking you, please, just get your friends together. Start to invite your people them. Left, right, and center. Just invite and share this link so that we can have this crucial conversation. Soon tell you what it is about. In the meantime, we're going to play our theme song. Come, make we worship. It's come make me worship you. Worship him, we deliver. Come make me worship him. Come make me dance and sing. Give thanks and praise to the King of Kings. Come make me worship him. Come make me worship him. Come make me dance and sing. Give thanks and praise to the King of Kings. Come make me worship him. Come make me worship him. Come make me dance and sing. Give thanks and praise to the King of Kings. Come make me worship him. Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Nissi, we worship him. Jehovah Shammah, we worship him. Jehovah Mech, we worship him. Worship him, worship him. Come make me worship him. Come make me worship him. Yeah, man. No say, it's worship time. This is time for a crucial conversation. We're going to talk about being brown in Jamaica and the Caribbean. And we are basing this on a crucial testimony that was shared by one of our publishers, Angela Slack. But before we introduce the people in the room, I want to first of all introduce my beautiful co-host, Denise. Denise, are you there, my dear?
I am. And I just like to start off with this text that's coming from Genesis 1, verses 26 and 27. Not in its entirety, but it says, and God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Created in his image.
Created in his
that's the theme. Yeah, when I read Angela's testimony, that just kept going on at the back of my mind, and I'm so looking forward to this interview.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, as you know, so before I get to our special guest who wrote that crucial testimony, I must tell you that in the room, we have Dana, as usual, who is going to be interfacing with our Facebook family. And we have in the room, of course, some other friends. Nora is back. Nora from long time is back, and Vivia, our friend Vivia, and Nico, and yes, we have some friends in the room. We also have, oh, Michelle Harris Thompson has made her way into the room through many trials. And we are going to be introducing her better in a little while. And Michelle Lemon is also in the room. But our special focus, who our writer, editor, publisher, she's also a curriculum designer and many things, is Angela Slack, who wrote that article in issue 5 of the KW magazine. And it is called Crisis, Identity Crisis in the Caribbean. Angela, are you there? Can you show us your lovely face? Wonderful. Okay, you may want to unmute yourself. Huh? Okay, I am trying to sort it out.
Is that better?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, John, for that very warm welcome. I feel like I'm an adopted part of the KW family because I feel so strongly about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm one of your greatest cheerleaders, you know that. So it's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to have this conversation with the rest of the sisters in the room today and others who are online.
Yes, it is good. And let me tell you, we know when we're having certain challenges, that is always because there is some element that has their eyes fixed on what you're doing and don't want something to happen. But in the name of Jesus, it not happened today. What God wants is going to happen today. Anyway, so Amen. I just let back in Dana into the room. I didn't even notice she was gone. So no, Angela, question 1. Where you born and grow? Where you come from?
Well, I'm a born Jamaican and a daughter of the soil and of the sea, coconut water.
Yes.
And everything Jamaican. I'm a typical foodie. I have food stamped on my forehead because Jamaican food to me, of all the cuisines in the world, I think it's such a melting pot and a cornucopia of flavors, and Jamaican food just nice. I can never get enough of it. And so I spent most of my life in Jamaica, and in the last 18 years, I've been a UK citizen.
Wow, 18 years is a long time still.
I know, time can really fly because I had to pinch myself when I did the maths.
Yes, we have, by the way, online, TV in Perry saying hello, Pastor Slack and our father's children. And Barbie is sending greetings, yes. And Errol Bean is saying, bless up the day, family.
So the original Mr. Bean, of respect.
The original Mr. Bean is online, can I tell you? So, all right, let's come back now to our questions, because we don't want to miss one pinch of what we have to share today. In your article, you shared that because of your brown complexion and red hair, you did not belong. To quote, you felt like an embarrassment to either side of the family tree. Is that where we're going to start?
Jumping right in the deep end first. Yes,
deep end.
For me, this is a sort of revelation that was progressive over time. As a child, you kind of feel things emotionally, and you can't really explain what's really going on. But in your knower, you know that something doesn't quite fit, something doesn't feel right. And because we're created in the image of God and we have the nature of God in us, something in us doesn't resonate with this notion that it's okay to differentiate someone, it's okay to segregate someone, it's okay to pick and choose and cherry pick people on superficial basis and on true basis like race. So in order to answer your question, I would actually start from the notion of race being a lie.
Okay.
And it's a misnomer that it took me 18 years to debunk, because I thought race was a legitimate thing growing up in the Caribbean. And even going to school and studying, I thought, you know, race is a legitimate thing. And then I realized it's a human construct, because race is defined by biological differences that makes one group of persons superior and another group inferior. And so if you create that construct, the dynamic is that you have groups that are going to be pushing themselves forward and groups that are going to be pushed back and disenfranchised in the process. And something in my knower felt that that wasn't of God and it didn't sit well with the scriptures. So I went to Ephesians 2:14 and read that powerful scripture. And my grandmother was a very godly woman. And in her presence and in her worship, the feeling of inclusion and safety that I had, I didn't feel that out in society. So there was this constant tug of war inside of me, and I couldn't understand what was it that made me feel so alien all the time. Now, I gave you the example of looking at the other members of my family and thinking, well, why isn't my hair as long as theirs or as straight as theirs? Or why is my hair red when everybody else have either black or dark hair? And I remember my mom sat me down and told me the story of an Indian man who was married to a Jamaican woman. He was an East Indian that came over, and they had a set of 5 children. And child number 1 to 4 more or less looked like what you would conceive to be a fair mixture between an East Indian man and then a woman of predominant African descent. And then here comes baby number 5, which looked a bit like me. And he wanted a divorce. And my mom, as a nurse, was telling the story. She was retired at the time, and she said this almost caused this loving couple to be ruptured. The marriage almost ended. They were almost torn apart. And it was the court system was brought in, and they proved that this is your child. And this woman who looks dark-skinned and predominantly African had European genes that she passed on to her baby. I think she had a grandmother who was Scottish, so the light hair and the hazel color eyes and the lighter shade skin. And so he settled down and accepted that it was his child. That story never left me. And similar things like that made me start to question, what is this thing of race really about? And I remember we had loads of kittens growing up as children. And I used to notice that when my cat had kittens, if she had 7 or whatever in the litter, you had 1 brindle, 1 white, 1 brown, but they were all kittens. There was no I didn't see the cat going, well, you're not my, you're not mine, you're not mine. She knew that these were her kittens and she accepted them as same and she treated them equally. And as a little child, I'm sitting on the door stoop and I'm thinking about this and I'm saying, but so why are we treating each other differently? Because I listened to the language in my home and I listened to how we spoke to people and how we deferred to people based on real trivial criteria. But the criteria may have been trivial, but the basis and the reality of how we treated them wasn't a joke because they were either shunned or economically held back or they were not accepted, you know. So these are some of the things that made me begin to feel, I don't seem to fit in here because I was asking questions that made my family very uncomfortable.
Yes. So I am here wondering now, because we do have two other guests in the room and people. Now we're talking about a very, very sensitive matter. When you talk about browning in Jamaica, it can be a very sensitive issue, right? And I was there thinking, all right, let's see if we can find a couple other brownings to see if their experience was the same as Angela's experience. And it so happened that the two people that I call, it was difficult for me to even think of my friends in terms of the skin color, you know, browning. Okay, who am I going to call? And I mean, first person
in your household, and you're back. Great. Okay.
These are the things that can happen, right?
Yeah.
But where were you? What did I miss?
No, go ahead. I was just starting because we were wondering what happened and I just started, but finish your thought.
Yes, no, I was just going to introduce our two friends, both of them by the name of Michelle. One is Michelle Harris and one is Michelle Lemon. And it just so happens that Angela also knows them.
Knows them, yes, my good friends.
It wasn't planned, but it so happens that she knows them too. So Michelle and Michelle, can you unmute yourself and let us know if your experience growing up as being brown in Jamaica was similar to Angela's?
Right. And you can turn on your cameras as well.
Yeah. Okay, who's going to go first? All right.
Hi, girls.
Hi.
It's been ages.
Hello. Long time no see.
Reunion. Okay. So who will go first?
Ish, you want to take it or should I?
Go ahead.
Well, when Joanne asked me, I said to her, I don't know if I'm the right person because I don't know that I've never been made to feel aware of my complexion distinctly. And she led me to go and read Angela's article. And it made me think about it. And the truth is, for me, I do see race as a human construct. I really don't see it as something that God ever intended.
That's right.
And so things that in my mind I'm not supposed to worry about, me now worry about. So I guess it would have to come into my face for it to make an impact.
Yeah.
And there are really there are two episodes that struck in my mind, or three that struck in my mind. One, which I suppose could have been classified as racism in reverse. In that, when I was at the university, when I was at UWI, I can't remember what it is we were protesting about, but the student body was protesting about something. I can't remember if it was raising school fees or something. I really cannot recall. But I remember us having a meeting with the guild. And one of the leaders of the guild at the time was a Rastafarian, Black conscious individual. And which meant nothing to me until because you had different, I think I remember there was at the time, one of the leaders was a Christian, and they were trying to rake her across the coal, I think, because they didn't necessarily want a Christian in that position, because it created issues for them to do what they would want to do free-handedly. So there was this kind of a back and forth going on. And I remember the same gentleman here stating things that's because y'all don't know what's going on. You see, all I know with a long hair, brown skin, and he was pointing at me. And at the time, I looked around because I'm like, I mean, what I talk about in my head. Because in my mind, I just saw myself like every other looking Jamaican that all the same to me. And that was the first time. And the funny thing is that what he was putting on me in terms of what projecting onto me as what my thinking was so opposite to what I actually felt, because at the time I was in his corner. But he assumed, because of how I looked, that I was Babylon and I was on the other side. And that was the only time I can ever really recall being exposed to a reverse racism, so to speak. The other I have is more recent, when I remember walking down on Red Hills Road to get something at a hardware store, and a gentleman and his little son may have been about 4 or 5, were walking. And I overheard him say, no, that's a real browning. And he realized I heard him. So he was teaching his son what a real browning looks like.
Oh.
And what he said to his son is, you see how the elbow not black, and how, so because clearly those who will be bleaching, I'm telling you, this is what I don't even know. He realized after a while that I heard him.
Yes.
Because he smiled and said, you know, greeting and no disrespect, and he went on. But those things stuck in my mind. I filed them. They never necessarily made an impact. I remember people asking. I remember being in an airport on one occasion in the US, and some Black American students were coming and doing a survey and asking about how you've been affected by racism and so on. And at the time, I honestly could say to her, I don't know that I've ever been affected by racism, because it had never really come into my face. And I could see her envy, because it was something that she lived every day.
Yes.
Those are the thoughts that I had, Joanne.
Yes. And Kathy Gale is online asking the question, what is the definition of browning here? So when you started, I said, well, I need to sit at your feet and learn. I never know about the black elbow difference thing, you know, but lemon.
Do you want me to take it from the historical perspective, Joanne?
Well, no, I want to hear Lemon's experience first. And then, yes, and then you can go into that. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies. Well, I can tell you the first experience, I guess, when I realized that I was a browning, as you would call it, is when I was in prep school, and someone had the chant, Black is beauty and red is corruption.
Yes.
So
I remember that.
So I was wondering who they were talking about, because I was interpreting this red as the color red, which that was me. And I really
hold on one second, Michelle. There is a feedback, and I'm not sure if it is coming from. Do you have on another device?
A fan or something?
Had on a fan.
Yes.
Oh, is it better now?
I still hear it.
Yeah.
But
it could be my machine. It's making a sound.
Okay. You know what though? I was hearing.
Is it better?
Just go ahead, because I'm still hearing what you're saying.
Okay.
Yes.
And yes, as I was saying, you know, that black is beauty and red is corruption thing. So I was wondering what they were talking about, until I realized that they were talking about me, and I was considered red. Because in Jamaica, before the browning concept was developed, I think, back in the day, you know, you were called red.
Yeah.
And that was very, very...
Ready ball.
because in my family, I did not know I was different. My mother is Black, my father is white.
Oh.
And I basically moved around both families on both sides, and I wasn't treated any differently by either.
Yeah.
So I really didn't understand that concept. As you grow, you realize that there is a difference though. And I remember, this is not too long ago at work, we're having a debate, and I think somebody got upset. I don't remember exactly what it was about now, but the person said to me that similar to what somebody said, you're lucky because you get away with things, or something like that, because you're brown and pretty, or something like that. And I thought, because I'm a meritocracy person, by the way, on the job, like I hate. So I was very disturbed by
No, explain what you mean by meritocracy person.
Right. I believe that, at the workplace, sometimes you get ahead based on friendships or whatever other reason it is. I believe that by the strength of what you do at work, the job, that is how you should be rewarded.
Right.
Okay. And that's just generally my belief in society generally, not just in the workplace, just with everything. So I was very disturbed by that. But, when I was growing up, one thing that I've told people about, my mother, as I told you, is Black. Mm-hmm. And me and my brother were brown. Mm-hmm. And when we used to go out with her alone, without daddy, mm-hmm. People used to not know that she was our mother.
Right. Yeah, I get that a lot.
Okay. So I developed this thing growing up when I was younger, that I would call her everything that I say. Like when I'm out in public with her, if I'm asking her to do something or whatever, I would say, mommy. Either mommy, can you whatever, or can you whatever, mommy. I would always add mommy to it because I wanted everybody to know that this is my mother. Okay. So I used to do that. So that was one thing I did as well. The other thing that I noticed is that sometimes when what I do, not sometimes, I do it all the time, because as Michelle was saying before, people assume that you're on another side because you're brown. Okay? Yes. The Babylon side then, Michelle, with things. And so I would always have to try to downplay some opinions on certain things. I'm always trying to almost make excuses for being brown in Jamaica. So, I mean, I guess I don't know if you want to call it racism in reverse, because when you speak to some Black people in America, they tell you that, especially with what is going on with some of these crimes with young Black men and the police, they're saying that they have to be teaching their boys how to even operate when they see a police or whatever. They have to automatically make sure that their hands in certain place, visible position. They almost have to make that accommodation just to not be assumed that you're violent or you're a criminal or something. Yeah. So, but that basically has been my experience. But I mean, living in Jamaica, I'm happy because I think we're really, to a large extent, I'm not saying they're not any colorism. I'm sure there is, but to a large extent, out of many, one people would try to live by that. And so when Michelle said that the person was jealous because he said he never experienced racism, it's true. I mean, apart from that, I mean, no real outright racism I ever experienced. And I'm happy to be Jamaican. It's because it's a big part why I don't even want to migrate, I'm telling you. Because when you realize what the experience is, like in America or England or some other places with Black people, you realize that we do, not that we're completely without anything that has to do with race, it is to do with race, but I think we're much better than those societies. So, as I said, that's why I like Jamaica. I like that motto. And that's been my experience. I remember too, one time, I should tell you this. I was at an event and somebody asked me, what am I? So I said, Jamaican. And the person looked at me very curious and said, wow, you Jamaicans, it was an American person, by the way. You Jamaicans I find you very fascinating. No matter if you're Chinese, if you're Indian, if you're black, if you're white, if you ask what you are, you say Jamaican. You don't say Italian American or Asian American or Black American. You just say Jamaican.
Jamaican, that's right.
Yeah. And so again, I think it's part of the out of many one people thing that we do. But I do think that there is colorism to some extent, though. I've experienced it. And I know that a lot of persons with darker skin also have experienced it.
Because this is what I was wondering, if the obviously African descended Jamaican would say the same things that you are saying in terms of this out of many one. I'm happy to be a Jamaican. I don't feel any sense of discrimination because of my color. I remember I have another friend who has the same kind of mixed race background, and I remember, but I didn't see her as being black, right? So she went to what was this? Disney World, I think it was. And then she came back and she's telling us all the stories. And she told us about this girl who was in the line in front of her and turned around and looked at her and said, "You're black. I hate blacks." Now, she was concerned about the fact that the person hated blacks. I was concerned about the fact that the person looked at her and called her black. Because, well, Marcel Goff, as I was telling you earlier, the first brown person I should have thought about is my husband. Right? And he's online asking the question, are we really out of many one? The truth is, I didn't really want to get too deeply into that part of the conversation because we really want to look at what we've been saying. We started off, Denise set the stage by saying we are all made in the God's image of God. Yes. And then Angela made the point that, listen, race is a human construct, and how God set it up is man set it up. However, the way we've been operating is not really like that. But I think that in Jamaica and the Caribbean, we tend to see the people of African descent as being people of clear African descent, like, the very strong quote unquote African features, right? The darker the skin color and all of that. We tend to see those people as being the ones who would get discriminated against. We tend to see those people as being the ones we have to fight for, right? Fight against Babylon for, Mish, right?
Well,
but we wanted, what we saw coming out of your article, Angela, is that the light-skinned, brown, red, whatever you want to call it, do also have their concerns, have their feeling of alienation.
Yes.
And feeling of discrimination. Mr. Bean is here saying this is so important, interesting, and relevant. Great thought that color is a human construct. Yes, but the way we operate in the world does not acknowledge that. That's why we had to start with scripture, and we never usually start with scripture all the time. But I think more and more we need to start with scripture, because if we don't start with what God said, we can go in all kinds of directions. So, Angela, you wanted to tell us about the history behind
Yes, I wanted to put that in put it in a historical context so we understand where these thoughts came from and why we inherit this baggage, you know, why we inherit this baggage, why we inherit this worldview and these attitudes and these reactions and responses towards how people look and how we treat them in relation to how they look.
Yeah.
And I'll go into the history in just a minute. I'll share it to you very quickly. As I was preparing, the Lord gave me a really beautiful vision. And I have a simple brain, so God give me pictures and capsules, and then it sticks. And the Lord said to me, he took me back to Genesis, and he said to me, well, I had a big picture, and I had a big plan for creation. And I drew the schematics for it. And I decided I'm going to make a tapestry, a living tapestry. And so God sat down and he started to create all the different threads that would relate to the schematics that he'd drawn up for this living tapestry. And so he made all the primary colors, all the shades in between. He made some thin and long, some short and thick, some stout, some twisty, some curly, some very fine, some silky, some rugged. And he created all these living strings. And then he starts weaving this tapestry. And the interesting thing is that as the tapestry was woven progressively, a fabric emerged. And where each individual string would have had limited strength, limited beauty, limited utility, together, their potential for strength was exponentially increased. They became stronger together, more beautiful together, and their utility increased together. And God looked back and he says, that's good. I love this. And I think it's the devil's workshop in Genesis when he whispered in Eve's ear and he said to her, look at the back of that tapestry. That doesn't look right. It's all messed up and twiggly and fuzzy. And what's God doing? And he put doubts. He made mankind doubt God's intention because he didn't understand what God was doing. He couldn't see the picture. He didn't have the revelation of what God was doing in his mind. And so humanism developed because we now felt God was being unjust and holding out on us. And we listened to the devil and we went along with him and we said, well, yes, we need the knowledge of good and evil. We need to do our own thing. Let's start to pull ourselves apart into our own groups, you know, so the yellows start to group up and, you know, let's unionize against God. And what happened? These strings that pulled themselves and segregate and separated themselves around whatever just cause they saw, whatever moral outcry they came up with, they realized that they suffered trauma in the separation. As the strings fell to the ground, they were compromised. Their structure was compromised. They were weaker. They weren't as beautiful as they were before. They were less of themselves than they were at creation. And God looked at it, heartbroken. And it was only the few strings that remained together that were showing a semblance of the picture that God had in his mind. So what do? We come to a conundrum. How do we resolve this issue of getting that living tapestry back together? And God said to me, he sent me to Corinthians, and he says, well, Jesus came because the scripture says we see through a glass darkly and we understand only in part. So even the devil only sees in part. He didn't have the full revelation. He couldn't see the big picture of what God was doing. And he says, but Jesus will be the embodiment of that revelation. He will show you the big picture. He will show you where you belong. He will show you where you fit. And he will redeem you through salvation. One, it's a three-pronged plan, this operation restoration, this operation repair the tapestry that God set out on through Jesus. Because we're a tripartite being and God didn't leave anything out. So he first on the spiritual level, he says, let me put you back into the tapestry, that's salvation. And let me give you the grace to stay there and to hold your position and your responsibility, your collective responsibility towards the next person that's overlapping you and you overlapping them. And then he says, well, there has been structural damage that you have suffered in your physical being. So that was healing that God gave us through his plan. And he says, well, your soul has suffered wounds in your thinking and your emotions, your rejection and all the things that you've gone through. And so he gave us the living word, because the same word that spoke in creation is the word that came back through Jesus to change our thinking and change our minds and change our concepts. So this project Restore Man, this project Restoration is a powerful thing that we have as believers. And if we subscribe to it, if we allow God to use us, that living tapestry will be repaired. And so we can't let history determine what is right for us anymore, because one group of threads pull themselves out and call themselves supremacists and determine that that group is weaker and we are going to impose ourselves on them, and we're going to subjugate them and enslave them and do all manner of evil to them.
Yes.
And because they've been able to do it for a long time through the historical record, that doesn't mean that we're going to carry on, you know, that model, the plantation model in the Caribbean context or the Americas context.
Right. So what I am very excited about the possibility and the intention of God to heal and to restore and to repair the breaches that have taken place. I am wondering if we are seriously identifying the breaches, because
that's where it starts. We have to call it what it is.
If we don't identify these breaches clearly, then we are going to overlook. We are going to overlook, and there will not be that place for the repair to take place. Yes. We can't repair what we don't see. And this is one of the reasons why this is such a crucial conversation, because we are here intentionally having a conversation with Brownings. Sorry, Mish and Mish. Michelle Harris Thompson and Michelle Lemon and Angela the Ready Boo.
It is what it is.
I say this with all the love in my heart, with no intention to hurt, right? But we are intentionally having this conversation so that what has been hidden under the carpet can be brought into the light, so that we can seriously work with God for the reparation and for the restitution and the restoration of who we are. Human beings made in the image of God, not people who are divided by, and these are things you referenced in the article, divided by elitism, by colorism, by classism, and reverse racism. I don't know if you want to take a stab now at identifying really how do you see those things being played out in our society today?
Okay. Well, I dare say, as someone who's studied history and looked at my society full on, that the plantation model, even though emancipation of slavery, the act has been passed and slavery has been abolished, the effect of that model is still at work among us. I'll be the first to give kudos and say we've come a long way, you know, but the belief that the masses, the pyramid, where you have the masses being the slaves and their immediate children being at the bottom, being as the laboring class. And then in the middle, you had the colored class. And to answer Kathy's question here, that's how we have Brownings, or what was historically referred to as colored class, came up, because the white master would have illicit sex with the Black woman, the African woman, and they would produce children. And so these children were the product of miscegenation. And so it was a violent situation where the woman had no say over their bodies, and these children were born. And they were not accepted into white society because they were an embarrassment to the planter. They represented his moment of weakness, where he left his wife and sashayed down to the negress's hut. You know, so these children were an embarrassment to the planter, but they were the pride of the negresses because it proved that they at least received some favor from Bakramasa. So do you see how at both ends you have this tension working in one space? So the children in the middle, the colored class, they are trying to gain the approval of their father. And they're also working with this awkward sense of resentment that even sometimes the mother would have towards them because she was raped, or the rest of the siblings would have towards them because them representing Bakra, who is not a positive image or a model for them. This has come over time, these subtle nuances. And as I said, in my family, I picked up on it, being a very sensitive child. I picked up on it because I noticed that there's one situation where when we lived in Avondale before we moved to Stony Hills, my mom was a very benevolent person, very giving, quite a philanthropist, very caring in a very localized sense. And there was a woman who moved onto that road, had about 10 or loads of kids. And this was back in the day when Avondale was, you know, well, I'm not saying it isn't now, but at that time it was like the address. You know, everybody wants to live in Avondale. And people would, you know, you look over at this lawn and that lawn, and they were all manicured, and it was, people used to paint them driveway, I tell you. And, you know, it was like, so when my mom would walk down the road, and this is, and my mother looks white, okay? Obviously, everybody in Jamaica mix up, let's not fool ourselves, but she looked really, really white. And she looks across and she sees this with tearaway children and the noise, and they just look so out of sorts and the chaos. The whole neighborhood was up in arms, oh my God. But my mother, being the practical woman she was, decided, well, let's do something about it. That poor woman doesn't seem to have a partner or a husband, and she needs help. So my mom went down there, stuck her nose in her business and said, you know, what's your situation? How much different father, blah, blah, whatever. And my mom says, well, I'll help you with groceries and support and money. And her eldest daughter, she decided to informally adopt her. So we were moving away shortly to Stony Hill, so we took that girl with us. Now, this is what I noticed. Now, for me, I am the wash belly in my family, the baby. I was excited that I got a playmate. Albeit she was older than me, but I mean, I was so happy to have anybody to play with because my brothers and sisters were long married and gone away from home. And I noticed that subtle things that would happen is she could sit at the dining table and eat with us, but she couldn't sleep in my bed. Or her clothes had to be separate. I said, why can't she share a room with me? And I'm busy, you know, smiling up myself to welcome her into my room. And my mother's like, oh, no. And these rules of separation. And then as a child, you see things for black and white, you see it for right and wrong. There's no grays in between. And I was indignant, and I'm saying to my mom, why can't she stay in my room? So you know what I would do? She'd be in my room at night with playing games or whatever on the floor, and then when mommy gone to sleep, I said, come sleep with me, you know? And I would get in trouble. She'd have to sneak out early in the morning and go back to her room, which now I look back, I realized was the helper's quarters. I just thought it was another room at the end of the house, but it was the helper's quarters. And my mother didn't treat her as a domestic help, but she never had the full acceptance into the family circle. And it's simple, subtle things like that you know, why the housekeeper was treated different. Why can't, and I drove my mother crazy with why, because I am questioning why. And she couldn't give me any substantial answer except that what I picked up is that this is the way it was, has been, this is what she learned, and I will do well to do as she's teaching me. So the hidden curriculum, even if she didn't mouth it, the hidden curriculum was alive. And it was reinforced when I went to my friend's home to play. I would say, morning, Miss Daisy, morning, Miss Josette. This is the housekeeper dressed in her uniform. Her room is right at the back. And the setup was the same.
Yeah.
So we were still relegating people to their place. And my mom, I told you in the article that my mom was outraged that I dated boys with dark skin.
You're even getting, you know, you're covering it like, no, this is just so scandalous. You did what, Angela? Say it loud and proud.
Yes, I dated boys I liked. I didn't care what skin they were, what skin color they were. I liked them or I didn't like them. But my mom, the first thing she clocked, oh, he won't do, he's too dark. And she going to a fit. And I'm like, what is she on? And I said, Mom, do you realize what date this is? You know, we're not on the same plantation anymore. And she would keep going over that the color bar in her day, and certain people couldn't get certain jobs. You had to be a certain color, and certain colored people had certain class and certain responsibilities in society. And she wasn't being racist in her mind. In her mind, she's teaching me how to be socially expedient. This is a matter of common sense and survival. And she was worried about her grandchildren. What would they look like? How would they get on in society if they're dark? So this was hard to deal with.
Michelle,
You can imagine the fights we had.
Because from Joanne asked the question, this is the thing that crossed my mind, because you're talking about, as you've made very evident, being transformed by the renewing of our minds.
Yes.
It's going to have to come to a complete opposite way of
roundabout turn, sister.
And training our children, because that is precisely the problem. And don't think it's just how your mother in her whiteness, quote unquote, were training her children, but the same thing is happening for those
today
in their blackness who are training their children, and the same thing for the mixed. And I think until the mind changes, the way we look at it, the way we recognize that this is something that we're just being socialized into, and that is how it goes. Until that change in the mind occurs, how are we going to transform our next generation? I mean, things, clearly society has changed. Thank God for Black Panther and you know, the natural hair movements. And
we've come a long way. Kudos.
A scenario where Black is beautiful and your natural is good. And yes, it's going to take time, but you still see parents who have grown up in this, who can't fathom what the foolishness you're talking about now. Saying, look, I know what I know. Yes. And training your child in that way.
Yes.
How?
Just to bring in some of our friends online, Vivian Pitter said, and she's quoting, things go wrong when humans interfere with the tapestry of the creator. I think she was quoting you, Angela.
Yes.
And Mr. Goff is saying, have we heard of slavery and house slaves and field slaves? And it seems as if, I think he's saying this is a carryover from what happened there. And post-traumatic slave syndrome is a reality. We need to acknowledge our history to go forward. And it is true, if we do not know our past, we are destined to repeat it then. And Vivian Pitter again said, the breaches are seen, but people choose to ignore them.
Yes,
when these are fixed, we will have a better world. Kathy's, they're saying, boy, you know, especially recently, she said 1,000,000%. I'm not sure 1,000,000% of what, because that she said a good while back. Recently, I'm not sure where I place, she said. And this is the whole thing, just the whole idea of us fitting somewhere in the hierarchical structure of society, and where do we fit? And well, Mr. Goff is mentioning now the Jamaican New Testament and the whole language thing, and saying from 2012, it really is a puzzle to some of us how it is that from 2012, which is almost 10 years now, we have had the Jamaican New Testament, and many churches are still not using it as a matter of course. It is, you know, an add-on, a special thing for a special day, but not there for everybody all the time. And he says, brown people in many spaces are treated differently in Jamaica.
It's
in
true.
many cases to their advantage. Now, members say him brown, right? But sometimes him forget. Sometimes we all
But I
forget.
want to pick up, John, I want to pick up on what Michelle said about
Yes.
taking that collective responsibility. When I was in high school, I had the privilege to be taught by a beautiful woman of God. The late Muriel Riley was my literature teacher. And in concerts, my history lessons were taught by Gloria Bean. And these two women standing on the left and right of me are the architects of my thinking. Muriel Riley made us read To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which was written by a white woman. And it was her outrage about how this Black man, well, she was commenting on society. So she created this character who was a Black man who was being accused of raping, wrongfully accused of raping a white girl. And he would have been summarily lynched were it not for Atticus Finch, this renowned lawyer who risked everything, a white man, who risked everything to represent him and to give him jurisprudence, which he deserved as a human. And I will never forget Mrs. Riley standing at the front of the class, and she said, Atticus Finch championed the cause of justice. That thing went straight inside of me, boom. It settled in me, it never left me. And I remember in my history lessons, so that agitation, that flame that I need to champion the cause of justice, wherever I see injustice, I must call it. Regardless of the risk, I need that fortitude to stand up in the face of adversity and say, that's wrong. And that became me. Because as I said, as a child, I was picking up on the inconsistencies and I was annoyed about it. But going to school and having responsible educators put that experience into a context for me, I became the little village lawyer and the little activist. I mean, when I was at Queens, if you had a problem, ask me, I would go talk to the teacher if you had sort it out. I'd go to the headmistress and sort it out. I ain't afraid of nobody as long as I knew that what I was on was the side of right. And this is being taught us our history in a way that didn't make us feel that we had to have this backlash at white society, because she did something which informed my teaching for the next 20 years. She put us in the situation when we did our slave diaries, and she said, what she basically said to us was, if you were faced with these such of circumstances, would you behave any different? Wow. If the roles were switched. Now it's a different story. So I'm in a society where I'm finding that I have brown privilege. Am I pandering to it? Am I accepting it? Or am I rejecting it? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yes, and Candice is in the room here. Candice from Trinidad and Tobago, and she says, I was always favored because I was seen as brown skin.
There you go.
Then as I grew up and stayed out of the sun, they called me red caramel. Then the treatment and attention grew. Then at university, I had to describe myself as Black because my lecturers only saw Black. Now, I remember having arguments with Marcel earlier on in the day about this whole thing of identifying as Black and not recognizing and acknowledging the other aspects of your ethnicity.
Yeah, we're unraveling the tapestry again, tugging and pulling at each other.
Right. So what happened you see, is that our white oppressors determined that if you had one drop of black blood, then you are black, right? Simply because they didn't want us to identify with them. Mm-hmm. However, that is not God says so. No. It's them did say so. So therefore, we are free to embrace every aspect of who we are and not have to say, well, I am black and therefore this is who I am. This is the only thing that I am, and not to recognize all the other ethnicities that make us up as persons, but then to go back to the beginning, as Angela and Denise had pointed out, to say, no, is this race thing is a misnomer, is not a God thing, is a man thing. And so we can't listen to what man is saying about who we are. Boy, a lot of stuff is going on in the room. Grace Taylor Myers is saying that is why educators are so important to societal change. And Tony Bryce is saying, great insight, Angela. Instead of celebrating the difference, we put a judgment on the difference and graded the differences hierarchically.
Yes, yes, yes.
Both the ant and the elephant are God's creation, different in size, yet the same in essence. God created them. And Marcel Goff is saying, Rastafari exposed me to being one with black, white, and brown people. Never once was my color brown a problem. We believed in one Father for us all, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And the Shemites were the brown people, the Japhethites were the white people, and the Hamites were the black people. And they all, in the 12 tribes of Israel, recognized that they were one. But of course, in different
the irony that
spaces,
the Rastafarians should have a more exalted revelation than us.
But it's them say one love, And I don't think everybody understands when we say one love, what that mean.
But Joanne, to address the one drop rule, I must say something.
Yes.
It's the litter of kittens again.
Yes.
7 kittens in a litter, they're only kittens. They are cat kind. And that's it. And the irony is that when we were being taught history, it wasn't arbitrary. We learned methods of control where the white plantocracy sat down, had meetings, conferences, and studied how to control the blacks because they could not sleep at night in their beds. Afraid were they that the Negroes would murder them in their sleep, and with good reason. You understand? So they sat down, and I remember reading like Thomas Thistlewood's diary and the documents of these meetings, how they would systematically set out how to divide and conquer. All of the things that we are experiencing the trauma of was planned. And these documents were passed around in the Americas so that you got it right. And if you had any problems, this is how you kept the Negro in his place. And we know the Jim Crow laws and so on in the US. And let me say this to you, what a pitiful paradox it is that the white supremacy class would come up with this one drop rule as a way to distance you from them and to prevent you from any rightful association with them if you were their child by lineage. You see, you can't own property, you're nothing because your mother is a negress. But you're my father, so I should have some heritage. No, one drop and you're dismissed. The irony that us now, as people of predominant black heritage, would pick up this nonsense, strap ourselves with it, and run with it, and perpetuate that lie and believe it, and beat each other down with it.
Yes.
I cannot see how we do that. And this is why I when I saw this YouTube discussion with Halle Berry, that is the beginning of my journey into where I am now. Because for a long time, I had 50 years of internalized trauma where I didn't know where I belonged. And I was literally confused. And
50 years, Angela? Is that a correct number? Isn't that your age next year?
My whole life, girl, I'm telling you, last year, the light bulb go off in my head.
Wow.
I have grappled with this all my life. And I was a silent sufferer, and I don't know if other people were, but you felt that you couldn't express these things in polite company, that people would be upset with you, and even in your family, you have to be careful which side of your family you offend. So you just internalize it and shut up. You know, I remember the comments when my son was born, and I cried over some of them. My son's own grandmother looked at my beautiful baby boy and said, I feel side this and I really feel which side him belong to. What a thing to say.
And this was because what? It didn't look too white. What was the issue?
Listen, in the hospital, I was treated different because it's a white baby. I am telling you about the nurses are over. There's one particular orderly who she just took a set for me. She came down and she decided that she was going to, you know, make my life just a misery. And what did I do, lady? You know, what have I done to deserve this? You know, I'm a pleasant person. I'm not upsetting you in any way. She just used the little power handle she had the best she could to get her own anger and her own rage out on me and an infant baby, you know? And I'm saying this to say, I saw this YouTube discussion with Halle Berry, and this star who has this big platform, she herself is mixed race. She herself, by definition, is a brownie. And she was along with a white partner at the time, and she had her baby girl. I don't know if you guys remember. And she was taking him to court for custody. And on the basis that she doesn't want him to have any custody of the little girl, and if not full custody, any custody at all, because it's a Black child, and she wants the child to grow up with her Black heritage and not to be around the white. No, I thought that was the biggest hypocrisy I'd ever seen heard out on the public stage. Because I said, Halle, you loved him enough to be with him, to create a child, and now that you want to be spiteful, you're going to use race to embolden your position in the courthouse? And what a silly mother you're being. You're telling that child, and in that moment, I saw me. You're telling that child to unravel herself, to strip the pieces that make her, and to make a decision between which one of our parents is more valuable.
Wow. And which one she wants to be raised with, because it's a question of, do I want to be raised with the privilege of white, or do I want to be raised with the oppression of Black?
You see, and that is why we, the people of the book, who have the revelation of Christ, have such a responsibility to be a voice in this conversation to the nations, because they don't have the answer. They're still looking at the unraveled back of the tapestry, and they don't see the picture at the front, what God intends. And so they have no idea how to treat with it. They still think that the best way is to unravel and encamp and entrench themselves and fight their own individual fights. But it is together that we are better. It is together that we are more beautiful. And it is together that we are stronger. And it's funny because God has a sense of humor. I checked the statistics. I think in 10 years, the entire planet is going to be swirly, as they call it.
Swirly. Mix.
Well, the citizens just have to dump in a bucket and drown themselves. Because, you know, I did a DNA profile recently, and I've been looking at other people who have done there. There's one thing I noticed. I saw common with these DNA results, that not one person has been able to hold up any certificate and say, I am 100% whatever. Everybody mix up. Yeah. Which proves the scientific point that we're one DNA, one human genome, one kind, humankind, one species. It's a litter of kittens. Pick which one you like, but they're all kittens. you know? So I will never subscribe to the one drop rule. And if anyone brings it to me, I'm sorry, we shall have words.
Denise.
Yes, Joanne.
Yes. Wow. I feel like we're just ready to like scratch
to start
the
talk,
surface. Not even.
It's all right.
But
just to humor me, the one drop rule. Remind me, what is the one drop rule again?
It says if you have one drop of African blood, you are African.
Yes.
So in practical sense, let's say your mother is a continental African and she's just come over into the new world and she has a baby with the white planter with Bakra Massa, right? You little baby are called a mulatto and you are consigned to live with your Black mom because she's Black. And if you have if you marry a mulatto like yourself, and you have a lighter skinned baby, you're still classified Black. And if you carry on, no matter how you carry on, because we can trace you back to your original great grandmother, you are Black. This is the one drop rule, because they didn't want to give any inheritance and any legacy to these colored children. So have you heard the case of Thomas Jefferson? What a hypocrite he was. You know, the author of the American Declaration of Independence. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident. I wish he could have held himself up to be evidenced by his own behavior. You know, in writing that document, his life was such a lie, because there is a whole side of the family that he had with this mulatto girl. I forget her name now. Her name escapes me. And the Jefferson tribe is huge. And there's now some sides of the family who are willing to share their estate and others who are not. And it's quite a conundrum and interesting how they're working through that dynamic. But he's just a very good example of it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Too interesting.
There's somebody here. Dana, I'm not sure if it is Lorna Swaby. Lorna Swaby said, regrettably, we are some ways off from color equality. And I'm not sure if it's her or you, Dana, who's saying, I know an influential mixed Christian fellow who said in my presence that he uses his color to his advantage in different spaces.
People do it every day.
I'm not sure he realized what he said.
People do it every day.
Okay,
and they're
so
very
that was
conscious
Dana.
of it. My fellow Jamaicans, let me make a speech to you all. You are accomplices to this crime. You are all guilty by silence, and you are guilty by not standing up. You're guilty by going along because you enjoy the privilege. You are guilty. And you want me to break down for you where your guilt lies? Let's look at our education system. Let's take one of my pet peeves. The Jamaican education system has this thing called the common entrance, or had, it's changed now the name, the common entrance exam. Now, common would suggest that it was supposed to give entrance to all and sundry, that it should allow for universal education of every Jamaican child from primary into secondary school. What a misnomer that was. And the misnomer it is made me clutch my children under one arm each and run for my life with them, because I decided as an educator, I don't want them to be a part of that system. Common entrance bolstered this whole notion where the church schools, which were established by expat whites, were the better schools, better in that they were better equipped, and the teachers were of better quality, because most of them in the beginning were actually white educators themselves, and then colored people took over after a while. So these schools had a comparative advantage already against any other school that the Jamaican government would have built in the 60s and 70s, immediate post-independence. And so people already had these schools in their mind on that social pyramid. This school means social mobility. This school means higher class. This school means better education. And so we had this crab in the barrel around education that the common entrance system did not fix, because we kept on playing this hypocritical game where the children were put through sweatshops. And these sweatshops, people made money out of it. Teachers jumped on the back of it and rolled out these kids to pass the common entrance and get into this school, that school. What a horrendous system. What a horrible thing for the child who have to sight gunshots, get flat, and run out of the ghetto to get to school, to go home and study under lamplight because there's tribal war and shooting out and there's no electricity in the community or whatever. And in spite of all of that, still pass and they don't get to go to the school of their choice because of their address. Or even if they have been placed in that school, they're still treated less than the children from so-called uptown addresses. These are just everyday occurrences, and Christians, we are a part of it, and we have the nerve to put a badge on our chest and brag about our children's achievement. What a nonsense. That is as bad as someone cheating and congratulating themselves for winning. Of course, your child did well. They started out with an advantage to begin with. What I would say should be the right way around is that every Jamaican child should have the right to basic, primary, and secondary education of the same and equal standard wherever they live. A school should be within walking distance or a reasonable commutable distance. And they should guarantee the level of teachers and the quality of the education there. So for me, I don't even need to talk about anything else. The common entrance in itself is our biggest boo, and it is a hypocrisy. And man, I hate the thing.
Wow. And, you know, on another note with regard to the equality in the education system is the day when I realized that I was at an advantage over many of my friends who would have gone into primary school at the same time, simply because in my home, English was spoken.
Yes.
And in
many of their homes,
oh yes, I was reading from I was 2.
Yes.
Right?
You couldn't find me, I'm stuck in a book.
Whereas, I mean, many of the children did not have English spoken at their home. So when they come to school now, and both of us are in the same class, but I already know the language of instruction, but they don't know the language of instruction, but they're being taught as if they know that language.
And ridiculed for not knowing it as well by some of these educators.
So there's a whole lot. I had overlooked. Candice had said, it's funny we use the slang one drop as a musical beat to help us hear the words clearer and join us together through the music. Yet there is a one drop concept to divide us.
Divide us.
You see how powerful language is, and we have to watch what we say. There's a whole lot going on inside the room. Lorna Swaby said the one drop rule reminds me of the caste system in India. There's a lot of comparison there, and
no different.
Yes,
really.
It really is. So Marcel Goff is suggesting that we read the book Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I don't remember the name of the author of that book, but if you do a Google search, you should find it. And Vivian Peter is saying you sum up the education system so well. And I should tell you that Gloria Bean sends her love. You mentioned her name, her love and regards. She says you were an awesome student and she's proud of you.
Oh, she's gonna make me cry.
Oh, listen, no, but don't cry now. Wait till you finish.
I have so much love. Oh,
we really, Denise, I am even trying to figure how do we wrap up here
Well, I have something I'd like to share. Can I share screen, please?
Please.
Yes.
All right. So let me go to slideshow. And it's just such an interesting conversation. 2 hours, Angela, we can't. Give me 2 hours. 1 hour is not enough. But you know what? I just like to bring back, Joanna is asking me to wrap up. And I just like readers, I've said this before and I want to say it again, that when God created things like the orchid plant, it is recorded that there are over 24,000 different species
of orchids
in the orchid family. And when we go to, for example, roses, they're saying that there are over 300 different species. We're talking about God now, the creator.
Yes.
All right. And so we want to get into the canine family, and we know the German Shepherd, we know the Bulldog, we know the Rottweiler, we know the Poodle, we know the Doberman. And we are told that we have approximately 38 species in the canine family. We go to the wildcats, you have the lion, you have the tiger, you have the cheetah, you have the black panther, you have the cougar. And we are told that there are about 37 or 38 different species for wildcats. But then in all of creation, mankind, human mankind, have the distinct privilege to be created in his image. No animal was created in his image. No plant was created in his image. As was mentioned at the beginning, male and female, he created in his image. So who are we when we come and talk about things that divide us, that hurt each other in the way we say you belong and you don't belong, and you're superior and you should not exist, and this race shouldn't be? No, get it together, people. Let us understand and come back to the beginning and understand that we have a God. He created everything. And if you look at it, he loves variety. He didn't put one thing for one thing argument. Say you have so many colors, so many different varieties and textures and sound, and it all come together for this harmonious, beautiful thing that he himself, it's him, it's a reflection of who he is. So check yourself when you're talking about racism. Check yourself when you're talking about prejudice. Check yourself when you're talking about bigotry, because you're certainly not representing God's church.
That's right. That's right. My husband has an expression. He says, God is after unity in diversity. And that is something that only God could achieve, that you have so clearly illustrated. Only God could achieve unity in diversity.
Exactly.
You know, where all creation is just a beautiful symphony. And that's just the marvel of what God is after, what the big picture was about, where his heart was, where his mind and where his intention was. And so we have to determine not to partner with evil, as you're saying, because it is evil. It is diabolical.
Yes.
Because it comes to destroy us, to unravel us. And it's funny, you drew for the pictures of the flowers to begin with, Denise, because Joanne knows that I'm working on a book called Droplets of Water, Shards of Sunlight. And in this hiatus that I've been in lockdown, it's made me very reflective. And as I'm coming through my healing and coming into all of these revelations, I realized that nature is the classroom. You know, we should all sign up for Lessons from Nature 101. We should really do that class and look around and learn from nature, that in every moment, as a microscopic level of a micro moment, like a droplet of water, there's so much happening in that moment, because that's photosynthesis, where the shard of sunlight comes through it. And that's life happening on a micro level. And we miss those moments every day, opportunities where nature is teaching us. But we become so blasé and so arrogant and so caught up in ourselves. And so in this book, I'm sharing the lessons that I have learned, and I am sharing the fact that I am determined to learn my lessons well, not to slip and slide back into what is traditional or what is cultural as far as it runs against what is godly and what is righteous. If it's not godliness, if it's not righteousness, then it's not good enough. And it doesn't belong in our mental space. It doesn't belong in our souls, and it doesn't belong in our practice of life. Because where we are woven into the tapestry, that's our sphere of influence. That is our area of ministry. That is where we are to make a difference. And I challenge everyone on this platform today that if you start with yourself, just with saying, God, show me the error of my ways, show me the iniquity in my heart, and ask him for the gift of repentance that will cause that roundabout turn and that change in us.
Yeah.
And we acknowledge our parts, because we've all been accomplices at some point or the other to varying degrees. And we acknowledge our parts in this crime against humanity. And we say, okay, Lord, I am sorry, and I'm not going to do this anymore. And if we move beyond that point of repentance to reconciliation with those who we have wronged in whatever way, sometimes we slight people in ways that we have no idea how we've hurt them.
Yeah.
You know, and we do it just as a matter of course, especially in the Jamaican workplace, the nepotism in the office. You know, how people are promoted and advanced, and it's who you know and it's your connections. Oh, that is criminal, the way we behave, because we're breaking the laws of God. If we move towards reconciliation and making things right, seeking forgiveness and saying we're sorry to people, and reparation where we can do it, where we can pay back and give back, like the Bible shows us the beautiful example of the tax collector who not only said sorry to Jesus, but give back the people and the money went thief, you know, and make reparation where we need to make reparation. I lay my life down on it that we will begin to see that changing of the day. Yeah. We will see a new day. It has to begin with us. We can't keep waiting for something to happen in fairyland or in blue sky world. It has to begin with us. And this is what my teachers impressed on me when I left school. And I talk all the time with the ladies in my batch, because I went to all girls school, the Queen's School for Girls. And
yeah.
And I will tell you, all of us, we are synonymous, we all agree on this one thing, that our education left us with a sense of moral responsibility. We felt we had to make a difference. And this is why I experienced such trauma, because I couldn't see how I could engage with my society, because no one wanted to listen and no one wanted to be honest. And people were perpetuating the very things that were hurting them. And I felt that the masses were saying, well, you brown, who are you to tell us? You know, it was like the Egyptians saying to Moses, who are you to tell me?
Yeah.
You know?
Whoa, so, yeah, because remember, Moses grew up in Pharaoh's
with Pharaoh.
house,
yes,
and
so
stuff.
The Israelite was like, who are you
house
to tell me?
Slave.
You know?
He wasn't even a slave.
Right. So
who are you?
I had to leave home to be able to figure these things out for myself and face the truth and go through my own repentance and my own reconciliation and my own healing in my own soul. I was so wounded on the inside because, you know, reality dawns. I think Michelle Lemon mentioned it about not wanting to go and live abroad. And she's right. Because when you land here, I had the distinct privilege of being the only mixed race person in my school for years. Me one. The only member of staff, and my children being the only children who are non-white British. And it's a strange experience. Yeah. But you realize that you carry a culture on your back and you have to represent it well. And I tell you, I had to unlearn a lot of bad cultural Jamaican traits, like thinking that everything Jamaican is the only way and the best way. and being like a bull in a china shop wanting to tell people how to live them life. A very Jamaican thing. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that. It's not like cooking, not like I had to humbly, we started with reading the scriptures in Ephesians 2 about being humble. I had to humbly learn and begin to appreciate that it had nothing to do with the whiteness of their skin. I had to learn their culture. And the Holy Spirit taught me that the only difference between us is culture. How we do, what we do, and why. And you see, that's a very good launching pad, because then we can begin to reach across each other and say, why do you do that? Show me how. We can start to learn from each other, as Kid of the Magazine is telling us every day. We can start to learn from each other and share. I watched a beautiful movie, I forget the name of it, I'm not going to plug them free, but it was a beautiful movie of a Nigerian girl and an Indian boy who met on the beach, and it was Kismet. Now, if the world was right, if the tapestry was not torn, all the story was about, are we compatible? Do we really love each other? Do we want to settle down? Do we want to start a family? But no, the unraveling pulled them apart, because the Indians versus the Nigerians, and it was war, and these two people were caught between, and these beautiful lovers were almost destroyed until they fought for their love. And both families realized, wait, we have more in common than we thought. And I love the way the writer treated the script, because the writer treated the script, because in the end, you saw the big spread of food, and it was a blending of the two cuisines and the invention of new dishes, and how there was unity in diversity on the table. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's deep. And that's the world teaching us. And us Christians should be the ones demonstrating that, putting that sort of material out there. So in my book, I'm addressing some of these themes, and I'm doing my little part in my little corner. And I'm saying, you may not be a writer, you may not be a publisher, but you're a mom. Change the narrative in what you say to your children. Stop burdening your children with your ambitions and bogging them down with your vicarious dreams. Look at each thread and say, Father, what is this? This is a yellow thread. Why did you make it? Where do you intend to put it in the tapestry? And get along with God and partner with training that child up to take its place in that tapestry. That is what our role is as parents.
Yeah, you said you went through a process that was answering a question that we had planned on asking, how do we bring this healing and this change that is necessary? And it seems to have started with revelation, which led to repentance, leading to reconciliation.
Yes.
And reparation.
Yes.
And then I would say that is what would lead to the Reformation.
Yes,
and
you have to take responsibility. Start with yourself.
Yes, right. Take responsibility. Start with yourself. Look and recognize that all of us, are accomplices. Whether brown or black or white or yellow or red. We are all accomplices, because at some point we subscribe to this way of thinking
and speaking.
Yes, it starts with the thinking, and then it filters through the speech. What we think is what we end up speaking. And it puts some people as being superior to other people. So I think, with all that we have had, and Denise, thank you for the beautiful pictures that just kind of graphically showed us what this is all about, really. We serve a God, our Creator, who believes in diversity so much that he did not create two people with the same fingerprint from the beginning of time until now. Two people with the same DNA, no. And so he wants us to be different, because in our diversity, we are manifesting his glory.
Purpose, yes.
Yeah. Amen. So we cannot unhear this conversation We cannot unexperience this experience. And we must bring about some form of transformation, change. Tivine Perry is saying change. We cannot change what we do not acknowledge. Many of us are in denial, and we are so arrogant that there's no room for a teachable spirit.
Amen. Amen, Tivine.
God has been speaking.
Yes.
And I pray that we have been listening. All the people inside the room, Anya, Nora, Daphne, Grace, Dana, Nico, Candice, Vivia, Michelle, and Michelle Harris Thompson unfortunately had to leave, but she was here for a good portion of the time and really helped us to see the picture. And all of you lovely people who have been following along and contributing to the conversation online. What we hope is that it won't be just a conversation that happened here and ends here. I think it needs to continue wherever you are, and especially in those times that you spend with God. And remember that this crucial conversation is brought to you courtesy of the KW Magazine, Crucial Connections in Faith and Culture. And as we said earlier, Angela and her husband, Homer, are the ones responsible for the design and outlay, putting together, and other things. As you see, Angela has already written a couple articles there as well. All the articles are available for you to read online. Dana is perhaps going to share that link one more time so that if you missed it earlier up in the conversation, you will catch it again. And there are ways, just if you are on the KW Magazine page, there's a button that says sign up. If you click that button and fill in the fields there, you would be getting all the updates on what we are doing. Angela, Denise.
Yes, ma'am.
This was indeed a crucial conversation.
Yeah.
And so
just wish we could just stretch it right around the globe.
Well, so let's see how well we can do at
get
that.
It on this.
So
share, just have a ripple. Share, guys.
Yes. And so we are going to declare the blessing all away. We are beg God to bless you and keep you. We are beg God to smile on you. We are beg God for showing him love, even though none of we not deserve it. And we are beg God for look upon you and go no feel peace today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. So telling come back. Oh no, what good and one love.
Man. Thanks